Shalom, and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of Rabbi Adam Kligfeld's weekly Rashi study class.
Anyone who's listening to this in the Temple Beth Am podcast series, sorry for the delay. Wi-Fi is not working great in the shul right now, so I'm doing this on a hotspot on my phone. I hope that it goes all the way through the end of the class. Mazel tov to Sue on Gil's wedding on Sunday. That was a lot of fun. So it's always good to point out the Sorot Tovot in our community. And let's jump in. We're reading chapter 12 of the book of Shemot, verse 31. Okay, we'll read the last verse very quickly just to get us up to where we are in the story, and then I'll ask someone to read. Vayakom Paro Laila. Pharaoh got up at night. Hu v'chol avadav, he and all of his servants, v'chol Mitzrayim, all of Egypt. Vatehitzak hagdolah b'Mitzrayim, there was a great cry in all of Egypt. Ki ein bayat asher ein shamet, there was not a single house that did not have anyone who had died. We spent a lot of time on that verse. We're not going to necessarily go backward. Rick, do you have a comment, like a lingering comment on that verse?
No, I missed trope stuff in verse 29 that I'd like to say, if I could.
Let's hold off for now. Let's see how we go, because this is our last gathering in quite a while. I want to see if we can just push through this verse. Barry, is there something you want to say on that verse?
No house in which there was no dead. I've made the comment before that the firstborn are not necessarily young kids. The firstborn is any firstborn of any age. And in many houses, the firstborn has already in another house of their own, raising their own family. So I don't understand every house.
Yeah. And Rashi was confused as well. That's why he gave the answer that drove Ilana a bit crazy, but it was creative. Okay, verse 31. Larry, do you want to read, since you're going to want to read R.A. Kaplan anyway?
ויקרא למשה ואהרון לילה, ויאמר, קומו, צאו מתוך עמי גם אתם, גם בני ישראל, ולכו עבדו את אדוני כדברתכם.
Okay.
So, I'm going to read it the way I think it should be read.
Okay.
Or a little provocatively. And he being Pharaoh, called Moshe and Aaron night and said, get up, get out of here from my people, you and Bnei Yisrael, which I'm not going to translate right now, and go and worship to Adonai, as you said. So I know that the way in which it's translated by everybody is, and Pharaoh, or he, called Moses and Aaron at night. But I don't see any preposition that would suggest it's at night. So maybe he called them night.
Yeah.
But before I leave, I just
Where are you going?
No, I'm going to give the microphone. I just want to read Aryeh Kaplan if I can, because Aryeh Kaplan's translation is, I think, wonderful.
Okay.
Brackets. Pharaoh, so he's clearly saying what it is, send for Moses and Aaron during the night.
Okay.
Get moving, he said. Get out from among my people, you and the Israelites. Go! Exclamation mark. Worship God just as you demanded.
What do you like about that translation?
It just it conveys that Pharaoh is apoplectic. He's sputtering. He's just saying,
Yeah.
Get out of here. What are you doing? Just go. You, like you said. He's ranting.
Yeah.
Because he's not calmly doing anything.
Yeah. It's almost as if Aryeh Kaplan's translation picks up on how Rashi read the previous verse, which is what turned Pharaoh into a lunatic. He couldn't sleep at night. He has none of the luxury of a king, and he's the one waking up his servants, and he's going door to door. And Kaplan is reading the verse on a pshat levels if that's the way we should be understanding this king in this scene. Yeah, the lack of the preposition on Lila, right? There was also no preposition on Lila in verse 30, right? We had Vayakom Paro Lila, right? So we have the same syntactical problem. Literally, it means that Pharaoh got up night, right? So what Rashi did with that Lila without a preposition is going to be different than what he's doing with this Lila without a preposition. But all of it is in the name of his trying to paint a certain picture. We've talked about this many, many times, of our enemies defeated and us triumphant. Our enemies humiliated, the tyrants cowed and humbled, and us, leaving biyad Rama with dignity. And it's sort of the story, but the Midrash and Rashi amplifies the story because it feels good to read it that way, right? Stevie, your hand is up?
I was going to say exactly.
Okay, Barry?
Curious is Ivdu et Adonai, not your God, but Adonai.
Right. Pharaoh's using Moshe and Aaron's name, private, intimate name for Adonai, not saying worship your God, but to worship Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh.
This is no ownership. There is at Adonai. It's a recognition.
A recognition, absolutely, yeah. Particularly if you compare it to when Pharaoh said, "Who is this Adonai that I should listen to him?" Right, that happens at least once, if not twice, in the narrative up until then. Good. Anything else that jumps out at you at the verse that's worthy of a question, Joel? Is that your hand? Oh, did I just have a vision that didn't actually happen? I swore I saw you go like this. Anyone else? Anything else on the verse? Okay, so let's look at, I'll point out one question. It's just really a matter of the way biblical Hebrew is written and also modern Hebrew, right? When you hear an Israeli translate from Hebrew into English in a thick Israeli accent, you might hear them say, also this and also this, because in Hebrew it's gamzeh v'gamzeh, whereas in English, we don't say also twice. We say both and, or we just have one in between. So that's biblical. Gam atem, gam b'nei Israel. Written in English, you wouldn't have had the same word gam twice, right? Rick?
It's a trope thing that you brought up. So the Lila is the same. It's got a Revia here, and also in verse 30. And then Halila in verse 29 has the same Revia trope. So there's a pattern there. And could I do the two Zarkaz? It only happens once in the Torah.
All right.
Thank you. So in 29, I'm sorry I missed it 2 weeks ago. On Vadonah you have a Zarka, and Hika Chol Bechor you have a Zarka. That doesn't happen. It's the only time. So I thought of the 10 Commandments, and when they're looking at the plague coming in, the little smoky, the smoke that's coming down the alleyways, if you remember the movie, and it's kind of meandering around. And that's the feeling that I got from the Zarka, the shape of the Zarka, and it's scattered. That's the definition of it. So
you think it's the only time in all of Torah that you have two Zarkaz before a Segol?
Yes, there's one other time. Okay, it would be nice if it was the only time, but there's one other time. It's in Bereshit chapter 42:21, where the brothers are admitting that they did a bad thing to Joseph. Aval, and then Ashemim Anachnu. Aval, Ashemim Anachnu, and there it's a Munach Lagarme on the Ashemim. Alachinu, on our brother. But those are the only two times in the Torah where you have two Zarkaz in a row. And thanks for letting me say that.
Yeah, I don't doubt you, but how do you know? Did you individually check?
I went through.
You checked every instance of a Zarkar in the Torah.
Yeah.
You need to get some sleep, Rick.
Years Years ago, I colored in all the Torah in my tikkun. Yes, it's crazy and obsessive, but that's what I did. So it's easy to see the pazers and the zarkas because I don't color them in. I only color in the common ones. So to skim along, it's not so hard to do. And I took some time and I looked through it. But yeah, I recorded them all.
Wow.
Yeah, so there you go.
What Rick is referring to, in case it's not clear, is that trup, the one that looks like a squiggly line or kind of an infinity, is one half of a trup partnership that is resolved by the three dots that looks like a segol vowel, but inverted above the word. And everyone does it differently, but something like this, the squiggly line would be na na, and it's resolved with na 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 na, or something like that. And apparently, there's only 2 times in the Torah where the opening invitation to the musical resolution happens twice before the resolution. Interesting. Yeah, Stevie.
I'm very impressed that Rick did this himself, but I did a quick Google search and they found that Vayikra 17:5 also has a double zarkah. I'm duly impressed because I would never have attempted this myself.
But what Stevie, what did you ask ChatGPT that gave you that answer?
I just typed in double zarkah.
Wow. Well, I wonder.
They also point out that in the book of Joshua, you have a verse with 2 zarkahs and no sickle.
That's even weirder.
And in the book of Kings, there's a verse with 3 zarkahs.
Wow. Is the one in Vayikra, Stevie, does it have a munach in between?
We'll have to pull up the verse.
What's the verse?
17:5.
Hold on a second.
Yes, I see it. Zivchehem, asher hem zovchim. Yeah, sacrifices.
I'm really not trying to stop on you. I'm very impressed that you.
No, I appreciate you bringing it up.
For some reason, the Safari page opened up is not including Trup. I don't know why, but yes, apparently there's 2 zarkahs. Is there a munach in between? Click the what?
Oh, in my tikkun, I had a kadma on the asher, so I didn't count it as consecutive because you had another trope in between. But in the Eitz Chaim Chumash,
B'nei Yisrael, et zivchechem, asher him zovchim.
Yes.
Al pnei hasadeh. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Rick. That was indeed worth it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's look at Rashi on Laila being sensitive to the same thing that Larry was sensitive to, and I think Rashi would. I think Rashi would appreciate Larry's rendition of it, given how he is about to understand Laila.
And I also think Aryeh Kaplan took a lot of what he said from this Rashi.
Yeah.
But first the Rashi. V'yikra leMoshe v'Aaron Laila, Magid shehaya mechazer al pidchei ha'ir v'tzoek. Hechan Moshe Sharui. I'm sorry, Sharui. Hechan Aaron Sharui. So we're looking at the first phrase that Pharaoh called Moshe and Aaron at night, or by night, or in the night. And so this tells us that Pharaoh went around. He was going around and around and around to all of the openings of the city and yelling out, "Where's Moshe?" I guess the Sharui is, where does he live?
Literally, is where is he? Where is he?
I don't know the word.
Yeah, but like the Shekhinah is Shruya, right? So where is Moses hanging out? Where is he present? Where is he filling up space?
So I'm just going to translate it as, where the hell is Moses? Where the hell is Aaron?
Right.
So this description is obviously influenced Kaplan, because it's showing Pharaoh as being wild. He's a madman. He's just absolutely,
so in your own 21st century English vernacular, tell me how that is a interpretation on the lack of a preposition before Laila. How is Rashi reading the word Lila in the verse to get that. He doesn't mention Lila in its interpretation, but he's clearly impacted by it. Can you make sense of it? And it's hard because the idioms change.
Because it's dark, and so he can't see where he's going. So he's just feeling the walls and going around in this absolute pitch black. And
Right.
screaming.
So the verse would then be if you had to retranslate the verse, the way Rashi's reading it, it's something like he called Moses and Aaron in a dark, nightimey way, right? In a frenzied, pitch black, you can't see anything crazy way. It was a nighttime. It was a night call, right?
And
Differently than you would do if everything was visible and everything was calm during the day.
And I just want to jump ahead for a second. We're going to get to it in a moment. This and Kaplan's translation are in complete contrast to the final Rashi we're going to read on this verse, which is very legalistic and suggests that there's a rationality to what Pharaoh's doing. What Pharaoh's doing here is the irrational response. And then the rest, we're going to see in a minute, then Pharaoh somehow gets control, or at least Rashi gives him control in terms of having him react in a more kingly fashion.
Yes. Alan?
It just strikes me that Pharaoh would probably, Pharaoh or his guards would have knowledge where Moses and Aaron were. After all, they've been there with, coming up to be able, and there've been like 9 instances where there have been some trouble, plagues that have affected everyone in Egypt. It just is surprising that at the 10th plague, he would be so discombobulated that he wouldn't have had known exactly where Moses and Aaron were saying.
But
Yeah.
they always went to him.
Yeah.
But even if they went to him, you figure after 9 times that Pharaoh would want to know where these people are coming from. But they're
Well, once again, it's an inversion, right? So they had been coming to him with a little bit of obsequiousness and honor showing Pharaoh that they have to make an appointment with him. And now we have Pharaoh running around Goshen looking for the hut in which Moshe and Aaron are living, right?
It's
The city.
the city. Why would he expect?
Yeah.
Why would he expect that they'd be in the city?
Hold on, no one can hear you.
No, my response to Alan, my question is, why would Pharaoh expect to find them in the city? The city, in this case, I'm attributing it to be the palace. Moses and Aaron, they're living in Goshen. They're way far away, and the last we know about them is they were talking to the elders.
Yeah.
I can't imagine they were all in the palace or in the vicinity.
It's amazing what can be spun out in the absence of a bet that either wasn't there because we think we know everything about the way Hebrew sentences ought to have been constructed, and maybe this was normative, or maybe it was once there and disappeared, right? But it really turns this into a 4-dimensional dream where we get to imagine Pharaoh's insanity. Barry, Stevie, Diane.
Yes, on the manic thing, surely Pharaoh has a police force, an army. Why is he sending out his entire messenger system to find them? He's doing it himself. He himself is going out searching.
Right. Stevie?
The Mechilta's version of this, which is almost identical, says Bechol Eretz Mitzrayim instead of Ha'ir. So I think Larry's point is well taken. That it's a little strange.
Yeah. Diane? And then
I'm struck by how tepid the JPS translation is
of the verse?
of the verse.
Okay, let's hear it.
He summoned Moses and Aaron. So summoned has a very different ring than he called to them.
Right.
Right.
And it's the reverse of searching them out, right?
Right. Up, depart from among my people, you and the Israelites with you. So, I mean, all of that's in the verse, but it doesn't capture the sense of the frenetic Pharaoh who's going around. Go worship Adonai, as you said. So it is true that they use exclamation points, but the words themselves are quite tepid.
And it's satisfying thousands of years later to read it Rashi's way, Larry's way, as opposed to JPS's way. It's satisfying to imagine that Exodus night he was in a twist, right, and that he was defeated and as almost lost his bearings. Paul and then Sandy. Might be easier off of the mic stand to pass it.
Give it a second. One other possibility we're talking about Pharaoh's quote unquote madness. It could be he was so excited that the reason there's no preposition on night is he was just skipping words.
So if we're hearing the story the way Pharaoh was telling and experiencing it, it's representing the pattern of his own speech. Interesting. Sandy, was your hand up? And then Rachel.
People are
Paul,
saying
keep it out of it because it's easier to move it around without it. Yeah.
about Pharaoh not sending messengers in this case and not having the police or whatever. Every single household had suffered a loss. Society had broken down, right? So maybe his servants and his police force and everything were dealing with their households.
They're also in grief. Yeah. Rachel.
The way the text, we've been going through the text, you have plagues and then you digress and you have some more plagues. And then we had, I don't know how many verses on how we're supposed to celebrate Passover through the ages. And now we're back to the narrative. Is there any sense in any of the other commentaries of how much time elapsed between the 9th and the 10th plague? Well, we are spending all this time on how to celebrate Passover.
Right. Guesswork, but there are no hints really in the text itself to give us a sense of the passage of time. And I don't think it ends. I mean, I actually obviously can't speak with comprehensiveness, right, in terms of all of the Torah commentators throughout time. But I don't think it ends up being an important area of inquiry for most of them. It's some reason it's just not what the commentators are focused on. They're focused on how the rules for that night turned into the observance that we inherited, and then the narrative of actually leaving. It's an interesting question, but ends up not being such a topic for Midrash.
I thought of it because in this particular verse, we're imagining Pharaoh's experience after all this time of seeing it just from the perspective of the narrative, the Jewish slaves' perspective. And for a moment, we're looking at the absolute breakdown of Pharaoh's internal and external structure. And I was just kind of wondering how that flowed if you kind of skip over the umpteen verses on how to keep Passover.
It's an interesting observation, Rachel, that we have a short period of time where we're in Pharaoh's consciousness, not Moses's, not God's, not Aaron's, right? He's searching after Moshe and Aaron, but the author is, and think about how when you write a novel, you have to make a decision. Are you writing in first person or third person? So if the author writes it in third person, then the author gets to tell us what happened from the perspective of many different characters, right? If you're writing in first person, this is obvious, then the only person in whose mind you, the reader, are placed is the narrator of the story. So God is obviously author of Torah in this context, but we're getting to be put into Pharaoh's experience independent of Moses's for a verse or two. Interesting. A lot of hands. Rebecca, Joel, Larry. Then we'll go to the next Rashi.
I clicked on the word Lila in Sepharia. So BDB shows a second definition after night, meaning gloomy, a gloomy sense or personal distress. Sometimes of avenging calamity without divine guidance or comfort.
That's how BDB actually defines the word?
Yeah, I mean, it
Interesting.
shows some examples. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Lael. Yeah.
And it's so if BDB is going there, BDB is really going on the language and the philology and not like some more frum translations impacted by Rashi's commentary, right? So that's a suggestion that the word can actually be used almost as an adverb and not just as a time of day.
Yeah, I mean, there's like in Isaiah, of shadow of Zion as protection, more often in a gloomy sense of avenging calamity without divine guidance or comfort. In Micha, in Job, personal distress, judgment. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Rebecca. Joel and then Larry.
In just a response to Rachel, didn't the instructions start on the 1st of Nisan and Exodus took place on the 15th?
The instruction.
What did I say?
I wasn't sure if you said instruction.
No, instruction.
Right. HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem, we understand it to be that they're standing on the Rosh Chodesh Nisan.
So at least 2 weeks between plagues.
Between 9 and 10. Yeah.
I'm sure someone's checked this out already. I'm not sure that the plague of darkness, which came before, was ever lifted. Does anybody? All the other plagues were countervened.
3 days that they couldn't move.
Imagine that.
Meaning we're not told that Moses and Aaron did something to formally remove the locust, remove the light, remove the darkness has not been obviously removed.
Okay, so
that's what the Lila could be.
Maybe this is still that dark. Everything's taking place in this darkness.
Interesting. You need a microphone.
The corollary is if the plague of darkness is the setting for the death of the firstborn, then how are the Israelites running around sacrificing and painting their doors?
Because the Israelites had light. Stevie. And then Sandy. And then maybe we'll read another Rashi.
Joel here has a nice chart that says which plagues were removed and which weren't. And it looks like there's a number that have not been removed or not explicitly been removed, at least. And so I guess blood, lice, and boils. And I remember learning in middle school or something that every third plague was not removed. And that therefore, like, the lice are still there when they have boils. Anyway, I don't know, but as I recall, in the description of darkness, it said that for 3 days they couldn't leave their homes. So it seemingly lasted, right? And then there's two different like it says 3 days it was dark and 3 days they couldn't leave or something. So maybe it's 6 days, but
but not endless,
right?
Yeah. Sandy.
If the plague of darkness was ongoing, I think the idea that they're doing the blood and everything on the doorposts, sacrificing, killing animals that are sacred to the Egyptians is a little bit less of a brave act than it might have been otherwise.
Because they were obscured. Yeah. Right. Depending on how you kind of plot that, because the Torah wants us to understand that where the Israelites were, there was light, even if it was next door to an Egyptian home that was dark. So could that mean that if you were an Egyptian and your home was darkened, could you see what the Israelites were doing in their home where there was light, or was the entire Egyptians' experience darkened, even if there was light right there, right? And at some point you get into a granular level that has no possible resolution, but it's interesting to be there. Barry, and then we're going to go back to the next comment of Rashi.
I found it in chapter 10, verse 22. B'chol eretz Mitzrayim l'shlosh yamim.
Right, that's what Stevie had said, that there had been 3 days of darkness. Okay, Larry, read the next Rashi.
Can I read the next two together?
Yeah.
Gamatem, and then Rashi's comment is Hagvarim, the grown-ups. Gam b'nei Yisrael, Hataf, the youth, the children. So that's why I didn't translate Bnei Yisrael when I translated the verse, because normally Bnei Yisrael is the entire kahal,
Right.
all the people. But here Rashi's interpreting that Pharaoh's saying, the adults can go, or the adults should go, and also the children.
Right. So my question is, what's the read of this verse that would have been different than the way Rashi read it, that he's disabusing us of, and why is he disabusing us of that?
Well, we're going to get to it in the next Rashi, I think, because that was in this back and forth, and I don't remember exactly the order. Moses says to him originally, "We want to go and worship," and he says, "Well, you can go, but not your children."
Right.
"No, we want our children." "Okay, well, you can go with your children, but not your cattle." "No, we want to go with our cattle."
But simpler than that. What's the simplest way to understand what Pharaoh meant when Pharaoh said, "Gam atem, gam bnei Yisrael"? Who's the atem?
You too.
Moshe and Aaron. And who's bnei Yisrael? Everyone else. So Rashi is efforting to have us not read it that way, that the atem is not the two of you, the tem is all the males, and the bnei Yisrael is the children. And the question is, why? Why is it important for Rashi that we read it that way as opposed to just read it you two and everyone else? What does that say up there?
Energy power, bad energy favorism.
Okay, good to know.
But the reason he does that is because of what's going to be coming in the next verse. He wants to put this in the context of a very legalistic, which we're going to see in a second, legalistic approach to what Pharaoh is doing here.
Right. Not the next verse. The next Rashi comment on this verse.
Right.
Yeah. Diane, then we'll go around.
So, first question, what happened to the women? Because the Gvarim is men.
Right.
You could have said Anashim, which would have been inclusive.
You're not going to like the classic answer that the super commentaries on Rashi give. They ask the same question, and their answer is, well, it's a little bit like by Yitzhak Yaakov Beersheba. Well, of course the women were there, because who would have been taking care of the kids otherwise? That's actually the answer, right? That the women that you mentioned, of course they went out, but they're there with the children, because who would be taking care of them otherwise? So they're sensitive to the fact that Rashi doesn't mention them, but that's not a great answer from our perspective. Yeah.
Well, the other thing is, what was I going to say? I forgot. Okay.
It'll come back to you. Stevie?
Back in the ninth plague, right? Moshe says to Pharaoh, we're not going to meet again. So every other time that they meet, there's got to be some sort of midrashic explanation, like, no, they didn't actually meet. And so here it's like Pharaoh's sending a message to the people at large, right? But speaking to Moshe.
Got it. Individually Moshe. Interesting. Okay.
So is this the
I hadn't thought of
question
that, Steve. That's really nice.
and maybe connected to that, is this hearkening back to, I don't know how many plagues before, when Moses was actually asking for, let us go out to worship and we'll come back.
Right.
And is that what Pharaoh is suggesting? Yeah, the men can go, because clearly the women aren't worshiping anyway. And you can take your children, but you got to come back.
So in the next comment, Rashi is going to read it exactly opposite that, which makes me think it's not his motivation here. One of the super commentaries on the question of the women, he writes, "Below Hutzrach has kier et hanashim." He didn't have to actually mention the women. Shekevan shagam hayeladim haktanim yotzim, because since the littlest ones are going to be coming out, even the babies, pashutu, it's simple. Sha'af imotehem yotzeh, that obviously their moms are with them. Sharei hein kruchim achareim, because they're wrapped around them, they're tied to them, utluim bahem, and they're dependent on them. So we mentioned the little babies, which includes the women, because how could the babies have come out even without the women? Anything else on these two Rashis before Larry finishes the Rashi on the verse? Okay, so this is the one you were referring to before, that it kind of ends legalistic. I don't read it as legalistic, but I think I know what you mean, that kind of closing all the gaps or filling in all the holes from the previous places in the story. But to me, well, read it and then we'll discuss whether it's legalistic or not.
I'm going to read it. I want you to remember the Purim story. And I want you to remember what happens when Achashverosh decides that he wants to annul his decree. He can't. He's got to have another decree on top of it. So it's a very legalistic approach to when the king says something, what he does. And here, Pharaoh's putting on his lawyer's hat, and he's going to say to him, he says, so now in the verse, what do you call the words?
The Dibor HaMachil.
Dibor HaMachil are, Uchua ivdu et Hashem, ki dibarchem. So he's saying, and you go and you worship Hashem as you said, meaning not as I said. Hakol kemo she'amartem velo kishe amarti ani. Everything is going to be just like you said, Moses, and not like I said.
Yeah, and just interesting the way Rashi chooses to write that. You know, in the past tense in Hebrew, you don't need the pronoun because it's built into the verb. So Rashi, this is us doing a Rashi, and Rashi could have written it as kamo she'amartem velo kamo she'amarti.
Right.
And then he adds in an ani to suggest that Pharaoh is really doubling down the fact that it is not how I said it. I yield. That's how you said it. The I didn't need to be there because it's built into the verb.
And for me, the saying is not just saying, it's I decreed.
Yeah.
Because Pharaoh's word is law. And then it says batel. So I'm annulling, or not I'm annulling. It's annulled. What's annulled?
Three things.
Lo ashaleach. And now I'm just going to translate this stuff without going to the references, which you're going to find, right?
Yeah, I think we should do the references one at a time.
Okay, so the first one is lo ashaleach, which means Pharaoh had said, and I have here a note that was in chapter 5, verse 2.
Right, so everyone look back to chapter 5, verse 2. This is pre-plague, right? This is right after burning bush, right? After
whoever finds the first two can read it, I think. Quickly.
After Moshe's reunion with his family, right? Chapter 5, which is this previous parsha, it's Parshat Shemot, the beginning of the 7th of Parshat Shemot. V'achar ba'u Moshe v'Aaron. After that reunion, Moses and Aaron came. V'amru el Paro, and they came back to Pharaoh. Ko amar Adonai Elohei Yisrael. This is what God, the God of Israel, has said. Shalach et ami v'yachogu li bamidbar. Dispatch my people, and they will celebrate to me in the desert. And Pharaoh's initial answer is an undifferentiated no. No is a full sentence, right? Vayomer Paro mi Adonai asher eshma b'kolo. Who is this God that I should listen to his voice? L'shalech et ami, l'shalech et Yisrael, to send Israel. Lo yadati et Adonai. I don't recognize God. V'gam et Yisrael. Lo ashalech. No means no. Okay, so Rashi says that initial reaction that Pharaoh had to the request is clearly nullified because now Pharaoh is agreeing to send. What's also nullified?
So the next one is Batel, mi v'mi ha'holchim.
Good. Look at chapter 10, verse 8. And by the way, Rashi could have used several different places to go back in the story and mention different moments where Pharaoh was setting out limitations for what he was agreeing to, because the first answer was a complete no, and then you saw the melting of his will a bit, where he would say, well, okay, maybe I'd consider it. How long are you going out for? Who's going, right? So you look at chapter 10, verse 8. This is in between which plagues? 7th and 8th? I think this is, right, this is just after the hail, right? I think, no, between 8 and 9.
Okay.
Right, between 8 and 9. Vayushav et Moshe v'et Aaron el Paro, that Moses and Aaron were kind of returned to Pharaoh. Vayomer alehem, and he said to them, L'chu yivdu et Adonai. Okay, I will let you go worship God because you've made the argument that you're not leaving long term, but just to worship God. Mi v'mi hahochim. Who's going and who's staying? It's very important for me, Pharaoh, to know that not all are going. That concern is also batel. That's also nullified. Last one.
I just want to mention with that one, the attempt we could ask the same question about, is it Moses and Aaron are going out? Is it all the adults that are going out? So the reason that this is generalized as to the question of who's going to go, you win, I lose.
Yeah, correct.
One additional comment. It's Eloheka. No, I don't know. But I don't know, like your God.
Right.
Okay, the last Betel Rak Zonchem Uvar Kerchem
Uvkarchem.
Yutzag.
Right. Look at chapter 10, verse 24. This is the beginning of the third aliyah of Shemot. This is right after the verse we looked at before about how the darkness lasted 3 days. So the setup to the 10th plague. Vayikra Pharaoh el Moshe. Pharaoh called Moses. Vayomer and said, Lechu, go. Ivdu et Adonai. Worship God. And there seems to be no limitation in this place on Miva Miha Ochim, who's going. Rak tzonkem uvekarchem yutzag. But at least I'm holding on to your cattle. I'm holding on to your animals. I'm not letting you go with all of your wealth. Gam tapchem yelechem echem, but your children can go. So Rashi says, and that third one is nullified too. So the comprehensive nullification, gone. The nullification about which of your human beings can go and which have to stay, gone. And also what's gone? The nullification of your being able to go out with all of your possessions and your wealth. All those are nullified, which means nothing that I, Pharaoh, have said in this process. Even as I was getting closer to a yes, none of that obtains. What you said. Ulechu ivdu etnai kid da berchem, not the way I said it.
I believe I want to say, reading what I said before, and the lawyers here will, I think, understand, or it's very lawyerly to want to put every specific in here. This applies to this decree, this applies to this decree, and this applies to this decree.
Yeah.
So Rashi has Pharaoh being very analytical here, in complete contrast to how he interprets the overall verse at the beginning, the first Rashi.
I would say it slightly differently. I would say that Rashi is not reading Pharaoh as a Torah scholar going back on the verses. Rashi's being the Torah scholar and using a fine view, a fine-tooth comb, to present Pharaoh again as utterly comprehensively submissive, right? The way I read it is not that Pharaoh's going back to his records and saying each of these individual things I hereby recall, I recant, but Rashi's saying this obviously shows that he's recognizing that nothing he said in this process holds any water. My view, but doesn't mean it's the right view. Let's go around, Leonard. And then I see your hand, Rick. I see your hand, Barry.
So this tells us that Pharaoh is obviously much more powerful than Achashverosh, because he was able to cancel his decree where Achashverosh couldn't. He could only come up with a contrary decree.
Right. As I think Larry was hinting in that direction. Rick and then Barry.
Hi, I noticed in verse 11 of chapter 10, when we were going back, when you were leading us through there, there's Gevarim there. Just thought I'd Lochein, not so, go now that are adult men. So there's a Gevarim there. V'ivdu et Adonai.
I'm missing the connective thread.
We were talking about why it says Gevarim and not the women too. And in verse 11 of chapter 10, it says, the Pharaoh says it. It says, Lochein, Lechuna ha-Gevarim, let the adult men go. It doesn't say the women there either.
Right.
It just says the Gevarim. That's all.
Barry?
So in 1024, we have Pharaoh's transition. It's not Adonai Elohechem, but now it's transitioned to Adonai, as we see in the last plague. But interesting, though, down below in 26, Moshe's referring to Adonai Eloheinu, not Adonai.
Yeah, so that's also Kedaberchem, that Pharaoh is now using the language and the vocabulary of the people he once refused to give any kind of acceptance of. Okay, good. That's verse 31. Let's jump into verse 32. Sue, do you want to read verse 32?
Okay, go. גם צונכם, גם בקרכם, קחו כאשר דיברתם, והלכו וברכתם גם אותי. Also your flocks and your cattle, take them, like you said, like you said, and go and bless me too.
Good. Before we look at Rashi, anything on the verse?
La briut.
On the construction of the content of the verse that strikes your fancy. Alan and then Paul.
The notion of being blessed. I mean, all this is going on now. He's saying he's being blessed. He's seeking a blessing right now. Why? What for?
Yeah, it seems to be on the simplest shot level, the apex of the inversion. Right. So Rashi walked us through legalistically the progression of things that Pharaoh once stood by and slowly realized that he couldn't, he couldn't make those things stand. And so now he is recognizing that God has the power, not he. And by uvarechtem gamoti, it's not only that I realize that God has the power, not I, but I need God too. I, who was the God of Pharaoh, need a blessing from God. Not only do I relinquish, not only do I yield and surrender, but daven for me too, right? So Pharaoh has become an Israelite. Pharaoh has become a penitent. Pharaoh has become someone who needs God's bracha, which is, I think the mountain has been completely overturned. Some of this work that Rashi does up until this verse is filling out the picture, but the pshat itself does the trick. Paul and then Sue and Joel, and I see Lon and Nick, and that's probably all we'll have time for.
Alan covered what I was going to say.
Okay, Sue?
Just even in addition, he says, Uverachtem oti. So Pharaoh understands that they are blessed. It's not just that the power of God is transferred and he sees it and he acknowledges it, but he also acknowledges that the Bnei Israel are blessed and that he needs their blessing.
Where do you see that?
Verachtem. It's you, and you should bless me. You
will bless me.
And you will bless me, not your God will bless me, not God should bless me, but I want you to bless me.
I think I was impacted what I said before by how Onkelos reads the verse. Onkelos reads the verse, not pray, not you bless me, but salo af alai, pray on my behalf. Onkelos reads this as if Pharaoh is requesting that they intercede with God. But you're right, the verse itself does not say, I need God's blessing, I need your blessing. Good, Sue. Joel?
On Sue's point, it says gam oti, which implies that somebody else is being blessed, and that's the people. But my question was, is there a reason why this is split into two verses? Or just because it got the last verse got too long, or is there a reason why the tzomchem gets associated with the blessing? It could have easily been written as one verse.
Where would you put the etnachta? Yeah, I mean, it's a worthy question that you could ask on almost any verse because the Torah takes its psukim, its sentences so seriously and so musically, and at some point there has to be a period. The Torah doesn't really have a way of doing a semicolon. But yes, it's one thought by Pharaoh. Correct. Larry or Diane, Larry, Sandy, Rick, Elon.
Okay. I'm just thinking of the story of Yaakov and Esau, and Esau saying, Father, don't you have a blessing for me too?
Yeah. Barcheni gam ani avi. Yeah. Yeah. It's pathetic. Yeah.
We're going to get to this in the Rashi, but I just want to read the commentary of Alter, not the translation. The translation is pretty obvious. You shall bless me as well. But as both Rashi and Ibn Ezra note, the desperate Pharaoh appears to feel the need of intercession. When you propitiate your God, I had to look up propitiate. When you appease.
You propitiate your God every day. I watch you propitiate your God.
It means when you appease your God. In other words, he's saying that he's saying when you go out and you do the sacrifices which will satisfy your God, when you do that in the wilderness, he is saying, he meaning Pharaoh, remember to put in a good word for me.
Yeah.
Put in a good word. it stands in such contrast to everything else that's going on here.
Acknowledging that your worship system works. It's not just that I can't defeat you in battle, but whatever you're doing in your davening, something's good happening there. I want to be in your prayers. Sandy, and then Elon, and then Rick.
I thought it was an interesting point about why is the sentence the way that it is, because it would maybe have been more logical to put the tzomchem, like even before, like everything, like you said, it could have been Bnei Israel and your sheep and your cattle, and then everything, like you said, and also bless me. It's almost like in a moment of real humility, he's like, take yourselves, take your kids, also take your cattle, and if there's anything little left for me, then put in a good word for me.
Good. Rashi is also sensitive, although he's going to read it slightly differently in terms of his answer, why we've got the kedaberchem, which seemed in the previous verse, like it's all going to happen the way you said it, not the way I said it. And then we have the addition of the tzomchem bebukarchem, and then we have another kasher dibartem, like you have said. So why do we need the kasher dibartem if we've already had the kedaberchem, which is almost a way of saying why wasn't the tzomchem and bekarchem part of the anashim and the Bnei Israel? Elon, you're done? Okay, Rick.
I don't think Pharaoh was so humble or humiliated or that way. I think he was still arrogant. I'm thinking that, okay, I'm going to let you go and you can worship your God. And he's thinking when they worship all the gods, they mention all of them. So when you're praying to your God, pray to me too, because I'm still a God. And I don't think he's so humble. I think he's throwing in an order to them, which is just not realistic at all. Like Moses is going to mention his name, but that's how he's thinking that. Okay, you're going to do this service for all the gods, your God, my God, whatever. You better mention me too, bless me too, praise me too.
He's still giving them instructions. What you're saying?
I think so.
Interesting. Yeah, tone is hard to pick up in texting, right? You ever give read or receive a text? You ever read or receive a text, and it can be interpreted because you're guessing at what the tone of voice was. Paul, sorry. So it's here too. We Rick is reading it and is entitled to read it as Pharaoh still being somewhat haughty, as if he has anything he could possibly make them do at this point. The rest of the table, for the most part, was reading it as him so out of options that he is begging for a bracha, which is right. Who knows? Stevie, the microphones are down here. We've been commandeered.
I'm going to say something similar to Rick, but that the whole premise here, every time Moshe's come forward to Pharaoh, has been talking about a short, 3-day, or give or take, journey, and to appease God, because if we don't, God is going to smite us for lack of appeasing him, and that we've got this festival that we need to get to. So I think this is sort of a wink saying you're coming back, right? Because every time until now, he's always said only some of you are going to go, right? That was his guarantee that you are coming back. Now he's I'm okay, I'm relenting. You can all go. You can take your stuff with you, but you're still praying for me, right? You're not.
But you're reading you're still praying for me and you'll come back and tell me that you've prayed for me, or meaning as opposed to a fully relinquishing, a full submission.
I'm not holding any hostages anymore, but you're agreeing that when you're going, you're you're not abandoning us.
Yeah.
Holding any grudge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a little bit wackadoodle also, right? Like Pharaoh saying, I've been good to you, right? So can you be good to me in return, right? There's something insane about it. I want to just read the Rashi because we're running out of time. We'll add a few more minutes because I started late because of the internet thing. And mostly it's to get to the second Rashi, but we read every Rashi. So let me do it because of the time. On the phrase gam sonchem gam bekarchem kechu, Rashi writes kasher dibartem, and sometimes this is pointed as a question mark. Like, why did Pharaoh have to add in another? That's umahu kasher dibartem. What's the impact of kasher dibartem, particularly since we already had in the end of the previous verse kedaberchem? And Rashi says gam atat titein biadenu zvachim olot. This one is in reference to yet another place where Pharaoh had been setting out stipulations. Look back to chapter 10:25. It's one verse after the one we read before, which is 24. And I will say that what Rashi, I think, is trying to squeeze out of this is not overly compelling, but I want to read it as generously as possible. So in chapter 10, verse 24, which we read before, that's when Pharaoh said to Moses, go and serve your God, but your sheep and your cattle stay here, but your children can go. And then in verse 25, we have Vayomer Moshe. Moses said, Gam ata titein biadenu zvachim va'olot. Not only are we not keeping our sheep and cattle when we leave, but you're going to give it to us. It's not only that you get to keep ours, we're taking some of yours. Va'asinu ladonai Eloheinu. And we're going to do this to Adonai, to our God. And then it keeps going. What Rashi seems to be saying is that Pharaoh never responded to that. Pharaoh never said no to that. And in the Kasher di Bartem, Rashi is saying, not only is Pharaoh taking back all the explicit things that you asked for that he rejected, but even that crazy request that Pharaoh didn't even honor with a response, where you want to leave with some of their stuff, I submit there as well, right? I will send you off with parting gifts with some of my tzon bakar. Is that in the verse? No, but Rashi is trying to understand why we have another kasher di bartem, as you have said, since the previous kedab berchem should have referenced all the things that Pharaoh had said. So even the things that Pharaoh had not said, and that what you wanted, you're going to get. Okay, but it's the next Rashi that I think is a little more interesting on uvarechtem gamoti. What is the force, according to Rashi, of Pharaoh asking the Israelites to bless even me? Hit palalu alai, pray for me, impacted by Onkelos, shalo amut, so that I not die. Shani b'chor. I've lost my kingdom. I've lost my slaves. I'm reading the room. I understand that a lot of firstborns are dying. I'm afraid of actually losing my life. Can you at least, happy birthday, can you at least pray that my life is spared, which, depending on how you read the story, is what happens, right? That Pharaoh does survive Exodus 9. So it's we've gone from powerful to pitiful to almost poignant. Like, can I at least emerge from this alive after having paid for all of my crimes? Baruch, I see your hand up. Still there?
Yes, Rabbi, I wanted just to say these last thoughts. Can
you speak a little bit louder, Bill?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm wondering if there's any significance whatsoever to the fact that Pharaoh's allowing the Hebrews to leave is done not from his throne, but off of his throne.
That Pharaoh has left the palace in a nighttime frenzy, and that he's sort of surrendered the throne already. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, because typically when Pharaoh would pontificate, he would be sitting on his throne. And when he would make laws, he would be sitting on his throne. Here, it doesn't seem that he's sitting on his throne at all. He's been dethroned.
Yeah, he has been dethroned. We will end here. I'll remind you, as I put in the WhatsApp chat, our next class with me is the Wednesday after Simchat Torah. This is the pre-high holiday break through the Chagim. Normally, we come back on the Wednesday of Chol HaMoed Sukkot, but there's no Wednesday Chol HaMoed Sukkot this year. I'm thinking out loud. In years past, we've seen if we did one class not on a Wednesday in order to do a class in the Sukkah. Let me just look at the calendar. Well, if we don't change it, the next one would be October 22nd, and I'll put it in the chat. Yontif is Tuesday, Wednesday. Should we do the first day of Chol HaMoed Sukkot, if we could, Thursday morning, October 9th?
Yes.
I'm going to put that into the chat. I'm going to first make sure that that the Sukkah will be available, but I like doing at least one class a year in Sukkah. So see if we can do that Thursday. I'll work on that. And the cliffhanger is that the first word of the next verse that we'll read then is a delicious word that I'm looking forward to zooming in on. Leonard, are you going to be teaching any of the weeks in between? All of them that are not Yontif, okay? All on Zoom though, right? Okay, I'll put all that information into the WhatsApp. I miss all this, but thank you for giving me the space and the time to get ready for Yamim Noraim. Have a good Wednesday.
You've been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast website or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information on Temple Beth Am, Los Angeles, please visit www.tbala.org.